I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with a head. Intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
It is game week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Although it is preseason, Buccaneers football has returned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to today's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. This Saturday, August 10th, 2024, at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do have a game against the Cincinnati Bengals. The first preseason game of the 2024 season for Tampa Bay. And Todd Bowles has already come out, said that we shouldn't expect any of the starters to play. I mean, maybe you'll see a few, but most of your starters are going to be riding the bench. So we have a couple of players we're going to talk about today, but regardless of who we're going to be watching in a Buccaneers uniform, it is still Buccaneers football, Evan, and it has been a very long wait. It's been a long, 7 months since the Buccaneers last played a football game, so I'm ready to go, my friend.
Yeah, we got a full slate of games, that the NFL is getting back into that full swing of things, right? So while it is preseason, and there are going to be times when you notice that it's preseason because you're like, wow, it's a tough watch, at times. But yeah, it is good that, and exciting that football's back and there's finally something to talk about other than making up scenarios or, oh, could this happen? Could that happen? Or even just talking about a training camp practice, right? Oh, who looks good here? That gets repetitive after so long, right? After doing the same thing day in and day out, just talking about these practices. Now you can finally watch against other competition in a game situation where they're keeping score, where the clock is moving, and you get to notice these players and observe these players and the players that you've heard a lot of about training camp, right? The rookies, Jalen McMillan. Now, I know Todd Bowles said, most of the starters won't play. He did say that, the rookies, however, will. So if you consider Graham Barton a starter on this team at starting center, he's going to be out there. So there will be a couple of starters. But yeah, it's good to see guys, in uniform and finally playing an actual football game after, like you said, a little over 7 months.
Yeah, and in the grand scheme of things, we know preseason football is inconsequential, but during the preseason, during training camp, I think the storylines around a lot of these bubble players are what get you excited and what keeps a lot of people watching the game late into the third and the fourth quarter, because some of these guys that we've been talking about during camp, they've been making plays, but they may not make the team. So the pressure is on, and a lot of these guys are going to want to step up and make some plays here in the early goings. Game one of the preseason, exactly the place to do it. But let's talk about today's cover story, if you will. That is the quarterback position. You just alluded to Todd Bowles saying that not a lot of the starters are going to play. That means that Kyle Trask, more than likely, I believe officially already gets the nod at start for quarterback for the Buccaneers in this one. And it's interesting talking about Kyle Trask this season because it seems like he's in a different situation than he always has been, but at the same time he isn't. Like it's odd because one, it's always very divisive talking about Kyle Trask. It seems like he has a lot of Homer fans, which is fine and great. They help the algorithm. They comment a lot if you disagree with them. That's awesome. We love people who do that. But Kyle Trask is now in a contract year. And this time a year ago, he was the talk of the town because of the pending quarterback battle with Baker Mayfield. Now, the legitimacy of that quarterback battle could obviously be debated to this day. Baker has the job. He took the job and earned himself a $75 million contract. So it's his job until it isn't. As far as Kyle Trask goes, this preseason in Tampa Bay is a chance for him to cement his future. And to be honest with you, Evan, I'm curious your thoughts. The future that I see right now for Kyle Trask is either a prominent backup in Tampa Bay or a backup for another team. Like, unless a very quarterback needy team has an emergency and they need to look to someone like Kyle Trask. If Baker Mayfield goes down and the Buccaneers have to look for Kyle Trask, then obviously you want to see him play well this preseason so he can prove he can step in and be the guy. But if that's not the case and he rides the bench all year, he's got a contract coming up. And the Bucs have to decide that, is he going to be a part of the future of this organization, even if it's in a backup quarterback role? Have the Bucs seen enough over these first 4 years to trust Kyle Trask enough to say, you know what, we like the way that he's developed. We like the way that he fills his role as a quarterback too, and we think he could be a part of the future here. Or do they look to grow and look to move on there at the QB2 spot?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you mentioned last year, and like you said about whether that quarterback competition was truly a 50-50, right? Whether it was a jump ball, basically. But at the same time, there were a lot of days that Kyle Trask looked better than Baker Mayfield in training camp. Like there were a lot of days. And I remember when I was at camp last year and I came away from that thinking look, it's not that Trask lit the world on fire, but he looked better than Mayfield, he did, and in the preseason, I didn't think Kyle Trask looked particularly bad, but Baker Mayfield played really well in those preseason games. And I do think that the games are going to hold more weight than the actual practices. Trask in practices this year has not been as good. I haven't personally been to training camp, but from what I've seen, what I've heard, what we've been told by guys like, Rock Riley or Matt Matera that have been on this show, Trask hasn't been as good, right? And the quarterbacks themselves, aside from Baker Mayfield, who's had some up and down days, John Wolford and Kyle Trask have been kind of So when you're talking about the future of Kyle Trask there, if he is back in Tampa Bay for 2025, it's going to be on a 1 or maybe 2-year deal for pretty cheap. Or does he play well enough in this preseason to where a team looks at this next offseason, right? And they're like, why not bring him in and see if there's something there, right? A former second-round pick, I believe, was a Heisman finalist or one of the guys that had Heisman talk at least associated with him in college. I know that was a long time ago. I get it, but it still matters. And GMs look for that kind of stuff, right? When a guy is a notable name like that. So can he play well enough to, yes, maybe secure a spot in Tampa Bay as the backup if he chooses, right? Or secure a spot to maybe have a legit quarterback competition somewhere else, right? A QB needy team that maybe isn't going to say, hey, Trask, you're the starter, but hey, you're going to get a shot to compete. Whereas in Tampa Bay, his chance to compete for a starting job is over pretty much, right? Unless an injury to Baker Mayfield happens, Baker Mayfield is going to be this team starter for the 2024 season and most likely the 2025 season. So even if Mayfield struggles, I don't think they're going to turn to Trask because they've had their opportunities to have Trask as the starter, right? Last year, they could have not signed Baker Mayfield, or they could have just said, hey, Baker, you came in, you weren't promised a job, we're giving Trask the job. But they didn't, because they believed in Baker Mayfield a little bit more. So the future of Kyle Trask is up in the air right now, I'd say, in Tampa Bay. I'd say more than likely than not, I wouldn't expect him back next season. But, he can really help his cause personally, money-wise on a contract. He could maybe earn himself an extra $1 million or more if he's able to play well in his preseason and show out. So I'm not sure. Obviously, we know Baker Mayfield is not going to be playing in Saturday's game against the Bengals. Not sure if he's going to be, how much he's going to be playing in the next 2 games. I would expect him to play a little bit in the next 2 games. Not sure how much that is, though. So, yeah, you're going to see a lot of Kyle Trask in this preseason, and it's a big opportunity for him not only to maybe stick in Tampa Bay, but to showcase himself for another team, basically.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest opportunity he's had these last couple of years, just considering who he was playing behind, right? Again, we can talk all day about the quarterback battle last year with Baker Mayfield, but the Bucs kind of signed Baker to be their starter. That was the expectation. Yeah. I think going into camp was that he was going to win that battle. Before that, he's sitting behind Tom Brady. So there weren't a lot of expectations for this guy to even play or get a legitimate chance at a starting job in the NFL. Now, I think for Kyle Trask, best case scenario here is just like you said, he goes out this preseason, he plays well enough to get the attention of another team that can potentially give him a shot down the road. Because I think if this season goes the way the Bucs want it to, Baker Mayfield is your starting quarterback in 2026. I think even if it doesn't go the way that they want it to, and God forbid, worst possible case scenario, we end up having to blow this thing up at the end of the year and they move on from Baker Mayfield, which probably isn't going to happen. But even if that worst case scenario happens, I don't think the answer to their prayers is going to be Kyle Trask.
No, if they're looking for another quarterback next year, it's not going to be Kyle Trask.
Right. So I think best case scenario for Kyle Trask, just like you said, looking to ball out, looking to play well this preseason, protect the football, prove that he can run an offense in the NFL. And another thing to note about the offense here for the preseason, at least for Tampa Bay this weekend against the Bengals, it's not going to be a difficult offense. I don't think it's going to be anything too complex. I think he just has to show composure and the ability to keep a level head and not turn the ball over. Help his team out, help put his team in a position to win, I think is what a lot of teams are going to be looking at. But for the Florida Gator fans, for the Kyle Trask fans, buckle up. If you're a Bucs fan and you love watching Kyle Trask, this very well could be it for for the preseason wonder that has been Kyle Trask. 2 regular season snaps, I think, maybe 1. Because last year, I think it was the Colts game that he came out.
He played in the Colts game, I think, 2 snaps.
I don't even know if he got in a snap. I think he handed the football off.
They threw it the first time.
Did they?
They did. It was an incompletion, but yeah, they threw it. And then he played. I think he played a little bit at the end of the 2022 season. He played like a series or 2. The last game against Atlanta,
the Falcons, yeah, and it was like game over by then.
Yeah.
We had seen the Blaine train come through, and I remember that was a lot of discussion about kind of where the Bucs were as far as considering Kyle Trask at that time. You had Tom Brady, they pull him out of the game. You've got a game within reach, and they threw in the Blaine train, and that's fine. But it definitely shows where their priorities were in the quarterback room as far as trusting Blaine Gabbert to close it out and then giving Kyle Trask a shot at the end after the game is too far gone. But it is what it is. Adam Davies, our friends from Bucs UK, says in the chat, I personally think the Bucs have seen all they need to see from Trask. I like the guy, and I'd love for him to stay in Tampa like the new Ryan Griffin, but the price would have to be friendly. I think that's what it boils down to. I think if Kyle Trask cannot do enough to move the needle, if he cannot mark himself for other teams after this preseason, I don't want to say he settles in Tampa, but I don't know if there are many options.
It could happen, but there may be a chance that he just wants to move on, there may be a chance he just wants a fresh start. So we'll have to wait and see. But you're going to get a healthy dose of Kyle Trask in the game against the Bengals.
Yeah, the other quarterback you're going to get a healthy dose of is former Ram John Wolford, the Wolfman. Zach Annexstead is out, the 4th-string QB. So it's pretty much going to be Kyle Trask and John Wolford here. And that's an interesting conversation in itself because we talk about the future of backup quarterback for Tampa Bay. And every time I hear about John Wolford, it seems like people have nothing but good things to say about him. Now, is this people who just like getting hyped up about a 3rd-string quarterback? Or does Wolford, does he really have some skills here?
I do like him. Again, I thought his camp last year was actually pretty good. There was actually some days where there was one practice that I was at that I was like, man, Wolford looked better than Mayfield and Trask. I thought Wolford was the best quarterback out there. And then I thought he played fine, in the preseason last year. I believe he got hurt, though, in the preseason. So didn't really have some limited time. But again, this camp hasn't played as well in the camp. But, I'm curious to see how he looks in game. So some guys just, when the lights are on, that's when they play better. So, I'm curious to see how he looks. And, for a 3rd-string quarterback, you can't really, honestly, it doesn't really matter that much because if you're down your 3rd-string quarterback in the regular season, you're screwed anyway. It doesn't really matter. But for a 3rd-string guy, I'd say he's a pretty solid 3rd-string guy. The guy who could realistically, if you had him as your backup, could it be better? Yeah, sure. But could it be worse? It probably could.
Yeah, and as far as sample size goes, this is, I don't want to say the most you're going to see of these guys during the preseason, but you're starting things off giving them both a huge chunk of the game. I mean, if you get one half of Kyle Trask and one half of John Walford, that's plenty of football between the both of them. So it'll be curious to see how they divvy that up, but excited to see those guys run the offense. Talking about the Buccaneers offense a little bit more, some rookies expected to play. We mentioned this guy on earlier this week's show with Matt Matera from Pewter Report. That is running back Bucky Irving. Now, as far as Bucky Irving goes, there's a couple more running backs who are going to be playing. I don't expect Rachaad White to play at all.
Yeah.
So Bucky Irving's going to be the guy, but I'm curious how long he's going to play. Because, again, we talk about these guys getting a big sample size. It is the first game of the preseason. A lot of the rookies are going to play, and we know the depth guys who are going to play. But I would say for the rookies in particular, you know, you look at Bucky Irving, what do you think the sample size is going to be? Do you think a full quarter is expecting too much here?
It's close. Because again, at the same time, I think Bucky Irving is going to play a role for them this season, right? So you want to be careful. You don't want to risk injury. At the same time, though, he is a rookie. Like, he's seeing this all for the very first time. So you kind of do want him to sort of earn those reps, right? You don't want them to be given to him necessarily. You are right. I mean, Bucky Irving's going to play. Rachaad White will not. Chase Edmonds probably will not. He hasn't practiced like much at all, right? Besides like the first day of camp. So you got Sean Tucker. I believe you got DJ Williams, who's an undrafted free agent. So, I mean, you basically got 3, maybe 4 running backs there. I might be forgetting a name or two. But, hey, I mean, look, so a quarter, I would say that's the max probably, because I do think the Bucs want to get him reps. Like, that's the thing. Like, I don't think they're gonna be completely with like baby steps with him. I think they want to put him in there, but at the same time you have to be smart, because I think they do want him to be featured in their offense in the regular season. So I think they're going to be smart. I think that they want him to see what he can do for one, and that they want. And look, even though it's preseason, right? And let's say the Bengals, I know that they're going to be playing some of their stars. I don't know about on defense, but the speed of the Bengals backups are going to be faster than anything he's seen at Oregon, right? So it's just different. So I think the Bucs will want to expose him to that and to sort of get acclimated with that speed. So I would expect him to play. I don't know how much he's going to play, but I think you'll definitely see him out there.
Before we get into the trenches, there is a pass catcher, part-time pass catcher, who has really been making some waves in this training camp and in this tight end room, and that is Devin Culp. So, I mean, you've got Payne Durham coming into his second season. You got Cade Otton, who's still young, but I guess the veteran of that tight end room now. And then you got Ko Kieft as well, another young guy in the mix as well. Devin Culp has really emerged throughout training camp. I've heard you mention him a few times. I've heard the Locked On Bucs guys. I've heard Pewter Report mention him. He is going to be making some noise, and I think this is going to be a lot of Bucs fans' first real look at what he can bring to the table, because you look at the tight end room, he'll probably be out there the most, if not the guy behind him.
Yeah, I mean, I've been impressed with a lot of the Bucs tight ends. I thought Payne Durham has had a pretty good camp. Devin Culp, obviously a guy who has come on. So Ko Kieft, I think you're going to see those 3 mostly. You are right; it's a young tight end room when Cade Otton is like the veteran, right? Like he is the veteran of the group. So I do think you're going to see a lot of Devin Culp, a lot of Payne Durham. Ko Kieft might be fighting for a roster spot, to be honest with you. Like there's a chance. Like, I don't think his spot is guaranteed on this team. So we'll have to wait and see about that. But I do like Culp, and like I said, he's shown up, especially at times during camp, and Payne Durham has as well. This making impact plays, right? I believe there's David Wells as well there. The guy that they just signed from the UFL, Canella or something like that.
Sal Cannella.
So there's a lot of bodies there, right? But I do think, to keep your eye on a guy, if you had to keep your eye on one of those guys, because Cade Otton's not going to play. If you had to keep your eye on one of those guys, I would say Devin Culp, right? I would keep my eye on him, but also like I said, don't count out Payne Durham there either because he's had a pretty good camp, and I'm excited to see what he can do, in game action.
Yeah, and don't forget, as the game goes on, look at the longevity of these guys, but look at their blocking technique. Look at how well they're protecting the quarterback. They're protecting the backfield.
That's going to matter for those types of guys.
But when you got Devin Culp and Ko Kieft, I'm sure both of those guys can catch a pretty pass. We've seen both of them do it. But I think the more physical guy is going to have the better chance here in the long run because between Payne Durham and Cade Otton, you got a couple of decent pass catchers in those guys. So going to be interesting to see, but excited to see that. Wrapping up the offensive side of the ball, let's talk about the trenches. And more rookie talk here. This is with the center, Graham Barton out of Duke. First-round pick. It's really weird because when we hear about the rookies from training camp, I would say Jalen McMillan is number 1. Chris Braswell is number 2. Bucky Irving is number 3, or maybe Irving 2, Braswell 3.
Yeah.
And Barton all the way down there at 4. It seemed like
the first round pick,
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
It comes with the territory of being offensive lineman, to be fair.
And this is going to be an interesting conversation to dive into because it seems like the more that we hear, the more information that comes out, the more it seems like he might be struggling a little bit. And on the one hand, you've got a rookie offensive lineman in the NFL. You've got a guy playing center who didn't always naturally play center. So, he's got the versatility to play anywhere on the line, but he's adjusting to the speed of the NFL. He's matching up against Vita Vea at practice most days. So it's like, give him a break. But snapping the ball was kind of an issue. That's going to be something I'm looking at in this game on Saturday night. But I think really just getting him adjusted to where he needs to be. If he is expected to be the Bucs starter, I would like to see a healthy amount of Graham Barton because it sounds to me, Evan, like he just needs it at this point.
Yeah, and look, just like you said, going up against Vita Vea, that's hopefully only going to make him better, right?
Yeah.
That's hopefully going up against that type of talent in your first ever NFL training camp. Hopefully you look back, 8-9 years from now, and you're like, man, that really, that was good for him, I wouldn't really be too concerned, right? I don't really think it's something to be concerned about, but I am curious, right? And I do have my eye on him because, how does it look, right? How much is he going to play? How much is Robert Hainsey going to play, right? Do they take out Barton, throw in Hainsey? Is Hainsey going to play the majority of the game? I don't think so, because I think, again, like it's sort of like the Bucky Irving thing. Like, I think especially with Sua Opeta going down, at that left guard spot, I think they're going to look for Hainsey to be like one of their first guys off the bench, if they need him in a pinch. So I'm not really overly concerned with Graham Barton, but it is something I'm curious to see how the snaps look. That's something that needs to be corrected quicker than just, you get beat off the ball. All right, whatever. You're going to develop that a little bit more. But the snapping part of it, there's been a couple high snaps, couple of, erratic snaps, I guess you could say. That's something that needs to be cleaned up, because that's self-inflicted wounds that you can't have, right? And if you're going to be the starter for this team come week 1, the Bucs have said it all along, right? Jason Light said it after he drafted him. Todd Bowles said it. Like, yeah, he has a good chance to start, but he's got to earn it. He's got to come in and he's got to play well enough to earn it. It's not going to be, oh, you were the 26th overall pick. Okay, cool. Here's your job. That's not really how that's going to go. So, I am curious to see Barton. I'm not concerned, but it is going to be like if you see a couple high snaps on Saturday, like it might be like, man, like guy might be a little bit more raw than maybe we really thought. And he might need a little bit more work, but at the same time, doesn't mean he's a bust. I'm not going to be calling a guy a bust after one preseason game, but it may be an indicator that maybe he's not as ready as we thought he'd be. Hopefully you don't have to have that conversation, though. Hopefully, all goes well. And I think he'd play similar to what Bucky Irving would play, maybe a quarter, because, again, he's a guy who, while he's a rookie, I think they're going to treat him like he's a starter almost. So I don't think they want to have him out there too long in this game.
Yeah, all things in moderation, of course, but I think these reps are going to be the most important of the preseason for him. This experience... hearing how he has kind of been struggling a few days here and there at camp, I think this is going to give him a better gauge of what he's made of at the NFL level. I know he's playing preseason. He could be playing potentially second and third string guys, but it's experience. I mean, a preseason game for an NFL player is still an NFL game. So would love to see him out there. Would love to see him, build that physicality and hopefully clean up the form. Hopefully no bad snaps on Saturday night, but something to keep a close eye on. And really quickly, while we are mentioning the offensive line, Robert Hainsey, another name to be on the lookout for. I think he'll probably be your backup center in this one. I would expect him to come back in, but it's going to be interesting as well with that left guard spot. Sua Opeta done for the year, so maybe Bredesen out there with the first team, or whoever is out there for the first team. But behind him, you've got Elijah Klein in that guard spot as well, and then the backup right tackle Brandon Walton going to be out there as well. So a lot of depth on the offensive line, and I think as far as that left guard spot goes in particular, you'll see a nice carousel of guys, and I think get a better idea of who could be your backup. Because as of right now, from what we've heard, it's Bredesen's job until he loses it. But you get a good look at the depth here, and that's always a good thing. Before we go to the other side of the football here, I want to remind everybody that today's show is brought to you by Autograph, the app that curates the best content, tickets, and gear to help you fan to your full potential. Being a fan is a full-time job, so Autograph does the heavy lifting for you. From tickets for big matchups to breaking news, the Autograph app has curated contents for fans of all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All the podcasts, articles, and game predictions you could ever want, including yours truly, the Cannon Fire Podcast. The new replay feature lets you get the day's news without the noise for when you need the TLDR to start your day. For anyone uninitiated, that means too long didn't read. Use promo code BUCS, B-U-C-S, to download for free on Google Play or the Apple App Store today. That is promo code BUCS, B-U-C-S. And if you're watching with video on YouTube, we got a QR code on the screen there. Bright green. You can't miss it. Scan that right there. Sign up for free with our promo code and help the show out. It's honestly, I got to say,
cool app.
It's a very cool app. I downloaded it. I've been using it. You can check me out on the leaderboard. You get coins for all the podcasts you listen to, the news stories you read. They reward you, and then you can use those coins for in-app rewards. One of the cool things about Autograph, too, that I don't think is talked about enough is that you can buy tickets to the games on there, but if you have enough coins, they give you deals to the games. I saw there was one deal where you can get 2-for-1 tickets to one of the Buccaneers home games this year. So very excited to be partnered up with those guys. But yeah, find us on there. I'm on there at Redicus. And then, of course, you can find our podcast on there at Cannon Fire Podcast. But an all-in-one community, if you will, for Tampa Bay Buccaneer news. You got the big dogs. You got us, Pewter Report, Locked on Bucs, Bucs Wire as well. And I'm sure a lot more contributors going to be signing up day after day. But yeah, shout out once again to Autograph. Thank you for sponsoring today's show. Go sign up today. Promo code BUCS, B-U-C-S. Evan, let's talk about the other side of the football here. And I wanted to talk about the defense, mostly because we just rattled off some names for the Buccaneers offense. But it's an interesting position that the Bucs defense will find themselves in here early in the game, because it turns out that Cincinnati potentially going to be playing some starters here. Joe Burrow, who has only thrown one preseason pass in his career, is expected to play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in front of the home crowd Saturday night. And then after that, you'll probably get Drake Browning, Logan Woodside at quarterback. Some other guys on that offense, potentially a reunion. Alex Kappa maybe going to be getting the start for Cincinnati, former Bucs Super Bowl champion offensive lineman. And then the former Mr. August, I like to call him, the tight end superstar, the preseason legend, Tanner Hudson, still on the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike Gesicki is questionable for this game. He's not going to play, if I have to assume. Now, I don't know Bengals like I know Bucs, but I'm going to assume that Mike Gesicki's not going to play. Maybe T. Hud gets the start. But the reason I'm bringing all these names into the equation and I'm talking about the Bengals starters is because we've spent all week, Evan, talking about these young defensive backs that the Buccaneers have ready to go in the backfield. We're talking about guys like Tyreek Funderburk, Josh Hayes, Rashad Wisdom. These guys have been making plays. Tyke Smith even finding room to make some plays. They have been making plays upon plays upon plays. Like, it's not just here and there. You know, Tyreek Funderburk is not a name that people were talking about before the start of training camp for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So these guys have stepped up, and now they have the potential here, depending on how long Joe Burrow plays. Can you imagine one of these young DBs stepping up and making a play early in the game, coming away with an interception from Joe Burrow?
Yeah, I mean, I think their opportunities for that will be limited because I
Yeah.
would expect probably a series maybe for Joe Burrow.
Maybe 2 passes, 3 passes at most. I think
Yeah,
3 passes,
yeah,
we're getting lucky.
yeah. But it is a nice little test, right? Nice little test early on because the Buccaneers defense is like Bowles had said, the starters aren't going to play, so like you're not going to see Jamel Dean. You probably now some people may disagree with this, but you probably won't see Zion McCollum. Like you're not going to see Antoine Field Jr. You're not going to see Jordan Whitehead. You're not going to see Levante David. So how do these young defenders, right, and more specifically in the secondary, how do they look, against the pass with now Joe Burrow is going to play. I'm not 100% sure if Jamar Chase is going to play. I believe that contract whole thing might
Yeah.
be an issue there. T. Higgins, maybe. I don't know. But they still have some talent there, and I think it's a pretty good test for guys like that, and especially a guy like Funderburk, guys like Hayes, Wisdom. Those guys are going to play a lot.
Yeah.
Tyke Smith, I think may play early and then be taken out. I could see all three of those guys though. Wisdom, Funderburk, Hayes. Wisdom more of a safety, Hayes kind of a hybrid, and Funderburg more of a corner. I would keep an eye on all the three of those guys. I think they're going to play a good bit in this game. Keenan Isaac's another one who had a pretty good camp last year. Kayvon Merriweather, the safety, had a pretty good camp last year, made the team last year. So I do think there's some potential there. Yeah, so it is a nice little test though for them early, right? To have a guy who has been to a Super Bowl, right? Has been to Pro Bowls, is a really good NFL quarterback, potentially targeting them. I think it could only make them better. So, it is a nice little test for early on, even if it only is just for a series or maybe a pass or two. It's still an experience that it's going to be valuable.
Yeah, and if these guys are getting a good amount of playing time, take a look at their usage over the course of the game. Some of these guys could be on the field 2 or 3 quarters. Who's to say they're playing the same exact position for 2 to 3 quarters? When you talk about the variety of that defensive backfield, how Todd Bowles likes to use his guys, it's an interesting situation, and I'm curious to see how they can come in and hopefully make an impact. A lot of these guys still fighting for a spot on the team. And as far as defensive back goes, we've yet to see them in the regular season. We've yet to see them against starting level NFL talent. I mean, we've yet to see them against second and third string NFL talent. We're talking about training camp. But I got to say, as far as the talent level, it feels like there's a lot more talent floating around the defensive backs this year than there has been in previous years. And that's even still with the presence of guys on this team like Jordan Whitehead, Antoine Winfield Jr., and a couple of years ago, guys like Mike Edwards making plays as well. On the defensive side of the ball, shifting focus to that inside linebacker spot. You mentioned no Levante David, maybe some KJ Britt, but
maybe, but probably not
much.
Honestly.
Yeah, not much. So the two guys that I'm going to be watching very closely as well, Servassier Dennis and JJ Russell, still on this roster, still very underrated linebackers, and I think this preseason is just another valuable chance for them to show a lot of fans who they are. They've been on this team for a couple of years now for a reason, I would think.
Yeah, and it's Servassier Dennis. I actually I wrote about him in an article for Bucs Nation. Should be out, maybe probably today at some point because we're recording this on Friday. Servassier Dennis may play a little bit of a bigger role for the Buccaneers in 2024, because it's a long season and Levante David's getting up there in age. Injuries happen. KJ Britt, injuries can happen to him. Also we don't know how KJ Britt's going to play. So, like, if one of those guys gets injured, Servassier Dennis suddenly becomes a starter. If KJ Britt disappoints and doesn't really play that well, Servassier Dennis may become the starter. So, Servassier Dennis may play a bigger role on this team than a lot of people are thinking. I know all eyes are on KJ Britt, as they should be, right? I think he's going to get the first crack at it. And he deserves it. He played well enough last year to get a shot this year to see what he can do. But Servassier Dennis is a guy the Bucs really like. The Bucs really liked him last year. He's entering his second year. That was the second pair of the pit defenders, right? That they picked last year with Kalijah Kancey and Servassier Dennis. So I think they really like a lot of what he brings. He played a lot of special teams last year, and I think they're eager to see what he can do in more of an actual defensive role. So I think he is one to look at, and also JJ Russell. with Devin White not being here anymore, everybody sort of gets moved up a slot, right?
Yeah.
Because the Bucs didn't really add a significant person, to that room. They didn't sign a free agent or they didn't draft one high. They signed Kalen DeLoach, an undrafted free agent out of Florida State. A lot of people like him, but he's an undrafted free agent. Like that's sort of got to be earned right now. So you're going to see a lot of Kalen DeLoach anyway, I think, in this game. But Servante Dennis and JJ Russell now have new roles in this defense, and their responsibilities now are going to be much higher. So I am curious to see both those guys.
Yeah, and then we'll wrap it up here with the pass rush, specifically the outside linebacker position. Looking at Chris Braswell, the rookie out of Alabama, and then, of course, Marquise Watts, and then I think you can add Jose Ramirez to that list as well. But Braswell at the top of the list as far as pass rushers go. I think he is going to be the one that we see out there that fans expect the most out of. If we see Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, I don't think it'll be a lot. If we see Anthony Nelson, I don't think it'll be a lot. So when you go down the list here,
with Yaya Diaby's injury, I don't think we're seeing either of those two.
Exactly.
To be honest with you.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, even more so, even to further the point there, the Bucs are going to be as careful as they can. But I'm expecting Braswell to get some healthy snaps here, and I would love to see how he matches up with whoever is out there at tackle on that first drive for Cincinnati. I want to get a good idea of where his game speed is, how he can adjust to the speed of the NFL. Because again, these are preseason games, but these are NFL games. And for a lot of these young guys, this is their first NFL experience. So excited to see that, excited to see the pass rush. I know every now and again you get a game in the preseason where one of the opposing offensive lines just kind of gives up by the third or fourth quarter, and they'll finish the game with 6, 7, or 8 sacks. Because of all the third and the fourth stringers by the end of it. So maybe we'll get that. But between Marquise Watts, who has been making some noise every now and again in camp, kind of struggled against Tristan Wirfs this week. And then Jose Ramirez, we had heard from Matt Matera, kind of a slow start to camp for him. Interesting to see if either one of those guys can build a resume a little bit here for the preseason, because again, it's a limited window, and I know the depth at outside linebacker is kind of a concern, but I'm hoping that we don't have to see a healthy amount of Jose Ramirez in the regular season. That would be not a very good sign, Evan.
Yeah, you don't want us to really see Ramirez or Watts, for that matter, a lot in the regular season. All due respect to those guys, right? Like, they're working their butts off right now to make this football team. But yeah, you don't want to see it, because that means either A, the players they have in front of them are not performing, or B, they're just hurt. So Marquise Watts is a lot of stuff to like there. Jose Ramirez, I still liked. I like coming out of college last year. Then obviously, but yeah, like you said, all eyes are going to be on Braswell, right? The second round pick, and the Bucs had their opportunities to pick multiple different edge rushers, in the second round there. There was even a lot of talk with a target an edge rusher in round one. There wasn't really any guys available for them in round one where they were picking, but there's a lot of guys available at round two, and they picked Braswell. So Braswell was the guy that I think a lot of people are going to have their eye on. And he's kind of been up and down, in training camp. There's times where he looks good and times where he's struggling a little bit, which, for a rookie is to be expected. I don't think you're going to, especially a second round pick, you're not going to come in completely, polished off and everything and ready to go. So I do think I'm curious to see how much he plays, because again, the Yaya Diaby injury, their depth is going to be tested a little bit.
Yeah.
Will Diaby be out there week one? Maybe, will he be 100% healthy? Who knows, and again, just like I mentioned with the linebackers, it's a 17 game season, long football season. Injuries are going to happen. Like, guys are going to get banged up. Guys are going to miss time. They're going to miss some snaps. So depth is important, and guys like Braswell, maybe even Marquise Watts, hopefully it doesn't go down all the way to Jose Ramirez, who might end up being like a practice squad guy, but guys like that might have to play. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully don't have to play too much, but in this game, I would expect a lot of Braswell, Watts, and Ramirez. Like I said, I don't expect JTS to play. I don't expect Anthony Nelson, especially after the Diaby stuff. I just don't think the Buccaneers can afford any more injury scare there, especially, with the whole Randy Gregory thing. Yeah. And now you got Diaby down. Your depth is being tested even before you play a single snap. So I think they want to be cautious with it.
Most importantly, the final score in this one is irrelevant. Remember, in the preseason, final score does not matter. You're looking for situations. You're looking for matchups. You're looking at certain players. And I encourage a lot of people, if you're going to be watching the game this Saturday night, if you've never taken the chance to try and watch football from a different perspective, this is a great opportunity to do it. Like, a lot of people I know watch football in different ways. You know, some people I know watch the game, they watch it on TV, and they always watch the ball. They watch who has the ball. Some people only watch the trenches. Some people only watch the quarterback. Some people only watch the wide receiver matchup. You know, I guess it just depends. So you're going to have a really good chance to watch this game however you want, but look for the players you want to look for. Look for the matchups you want to see. Look for situations. Look for goal line stands, third and short, running clock, 2-minute drill. I mean, there's a lot of fun situations teams can put themselves in, and depending on who's on the field, it could be a lot of fun watching them, drive their way out of it. If Kyle Trask has the ball in his hands with 1:30 left to go and the Bucs are trailing 3, that'd be a lot of fun to watch. So it'll be interesting to see what the Bucs ultimately roll out here against the Cincinnati Bengals. But the wait is over, ladies and gentlemen. Bucs football is officially back. But I believe, Evan, I think that's just about going to do it for today's game preview episode of the Cannon Fire podcast. Once again, no final score prediction for you today. It's irrelevant. It doesn't feel right putting out a score prediction on a preseason game.
It's a scrimmage played in a stadium with your full uniform on. That's what it is. You know, that fans can go buy tickets to.
Yeah.
That's what it is, basically. You know.
And depending on how scummy your franchise is, they might charge you full price for these games. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. And check out his written work at BucsNation.com. You got anything getting ready for the game this week?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not sure if it's going to be out tonight or tomorrow, but at some point before the game, there will be players to watch coming out where I just expand a little bit more on some guys to watch in this game. Try not to pick all rookies. I think there is a lot of rookies in it, but try not to do all rookies. So I try to throw in a few mixers there. But I mean, other than that, not just me, everybody else, the whole staff we got at Bucs Nation. So we're going to be covering the game. And like you said earlier in the show, to open the show, you get back into the swing of things, of football, being back and, sort of getting back into that flow of like a game day, basically. So it's, pretty fun.
Beautiful. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show. Thank you once again, folks, for tuning in. We will talk to you. We'll talk to you after the game. Maybe, possibly, I'll go live tomorrow night and take a couple of phone calls after the game. I don't know for sure. Kind of planning it on the spot. But we 100% will talk to you and break down the game afterwards on Sunday. I'm your host, Rhett Matthews, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. Thank you once again for hanging out with us live here on YouTube. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.